My son died 2.5 years ago, or so I believed. Every month I drove 40 minutes across Cincinnati in my old Silverado and handed my daughter-in-law an envelope with $750 in 20s. Money I earned doing brake jobs and oil changes at 67 years old, long past the age any man with a bad shoulder should still be crawling under cars. I did it for my grandson. I did it because Patrick had left behind debt, and that boy still needed groceries and a roof. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Then one October afternoon, my grandson showed me a crayon drawing of a man, and 30 months of what I'd believed collapsed like a house with no foundation. I'm grateful you're here. Before this story goes any further, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or state in the comments. It matters to me to know you're out there. Should also say this before we begin. Some details have been changed to protect the people involved, but the lesson at the center of all this, that part is as real as anything I've ever lived. Now let me take you back to where it started. Patrick was my only son, 38 years old when he died. He worked as a regional sales manager for a logistics company called Northern Supply Solutions, driving between their Cincinnati office and distribution sites across Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. Good job, decent pay. He traveled a lot, but he always called on Sunday afternoons, always right around 2 o'clock. In February, 2 years and 8 months ago, a company representative came to my front door in Anderson Township. Thin man, gray wool coat. He said his name was Mr. Finley. He told me Patrick had been in an accident on I-70 near Columbus. A semi had crossed the center line in freezing rain. Patrick's company car never had a chance. By the time paramedics reached the scene, he was gone. I remember standing in the doorway, not understanding the words at first, like hearing someone speak underwater. Mr. Finley had a folder. He handed it to me with both hands, like it was something fragile. Inside was a death certificate, an insurance summary, a letter from Northern Supply Solutions listing their grief support resources. My wife was standing behind me. She made a sound I will never forget as long as I live. Not a scream, not even crying, just a sound, low, hollow, like something leaving her body. Patrick was cremated. The company handled the arrangements. A plain bronze urn arrived by courier 6 days later. I set it on the fireplace mantel in the living room, next to Patrick's high school graduation photo. I couldn't make myself scatter the ashes or plan a burial service. I told myself I'd do it when I was ready. I was never ready. And my wife was barely speaking by then. She lasted 10 months after that February. The doctors said heart failure. I said grief. Those aren't different things. She stopped eating in the spring, stopped sleeping by summer. I'd come downstairs at 2 in the morning and find her in the living room chair, facing the mantel, talking to that urn in the dark, telling Patrick about her day, telling him how Miles was growing, asking him if he was at peace. She died on a December morning. I found her in that same chair. 6 weeks after her funeral, my daughter-in-law came by. She sat at my kitchen table with a folder of her own bank statements, a loan summary from a credit union, past due notices. Patrick had borrowed $27,000 before he died, a personal loan to cover Miles's medical bills from an ear surgery the boy had as a baby, plus a credit card balance that had gotten away from him. She'd been paying the minimums, but the interest was eating her alive. She didn't ask outright. She laid the papers on the table and looked at me with exhausted eyes. Miles was on the floor behind her, pushing a toy truck along the baseboard. I agreed to $750 a month, 36 payments, $27,000 roughly. It would take me to age 70 to finish. But what was I going to do? Let my grandson's mother drown in debt? Let Miles grow up watching the lights get shut off? So that became my life. Every first of the month, envelope, 20s, 40 minutes across Cincinnati. My daughter-in-law would take it without much of a thank you. She'd let me see Miles for maybe half an hour. Then I'd drive home alone. By the time this story starts, I was on month 33 of 36. 3 payments left. 3 months until I was done. I didn't resent the money. I resented the distance. Before Patrick died, she'd been warm enough with me. After, I was a meter reader she had to tolerate once a month. Miles called on birthdays and holidays. I saw him maybe 5 or 6 times a year. She always had a reason why more wasn't possible. I told myself it was grief. I told myself she was doing the best she could. That October afternoon, I brought Miles a model car kit, a '69 Mustang, The kind Patrick and I used to build together when he was about Miles's age. Miles lit up when he saw the box. We sat on the living room carpet and started sorting the pieces. My daughter-in-law went into the kitchen. I could hear her on the phone in there, voice low, and turned away. Miles was pressing a decal carefully onto the door panel when he said it, not even looking up. "Grandpa, does Daddy's voice sound the same as it used to?" I kept my hands still. "What do you mean, buddy?" "On the phone, his voice. Does it sound the same as when I was little?" The room went very quiet. My daughter-in-law's voice murmured on in the kitchen. "Miles," I kept my voice even, "who calls you on the phone?" He shrugged the way 8-year-olds shrug when something seems obvious to them. "Daddy does, sometimes at night. Mom lets me use her phone." I finished pressing the decal down with my thumb. I smiled at him. I said that sounded nice. I didn't say anything else. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and couldn't feel either of them. That night, I called Jerome. Jerome and I had worked together in the mid-90s. I used to do fleet maintenance for the Cincinnati Police Department, and he was a detective then, property crimes. We stayed friends after I moved on. He retired 5 years ago after 28 years on the job. He still had contacts everywhere, and he still asked questions the same way he always did. Quiet, precise, no wasted words. I told him what Miles had said. I told him everything about Patrick, about Mr. Finley, about the urn on my mantel. Jerome didn't tell me I was imagining things. He just asked if I'd ever verified the accident independently. I hadn't. I'd taken a folder from a stranger and let it define the last 2.5 years of my life. Because who lies about a thing like that? "Give me a couple days," Jerome said. He called back in 48 hours. His voice had that particular careful quality I recognized from years ago, the way he got when something wasn't adding up and he knew it. There was a security camera in my daughter-in-law's building. Management had installed it on the stairwell landing 6 months ago, after a string of package thefts. Jerome had a contact who pulled the footage. I drove to his house the next morning. He had it queued up on his laptop. The timestamp read 2:07 a.m. The morning after my last payment drop. The stairwell was empty, gray in the night vision filter. Then a figure appeared climbing the stairs. A man, maybe late 30s, dark hoodie, baseball cap pulled low. He moved deliberately, like someone avoiding noise. But there was something about the way he carried his right shoulder, lower than the left. Every few steps, his right side dipped slightly and corrected. Like the muscles around that shoulder were compensating for something that hadn't healed right. My chest tightened. Patrick broke his right collarbone in 2018 playing pickup basketball at the YMCA. Compound fracture, surgery, screws, 6 months of physical therapy. The shoulder was never quite the same after that. It sat a half-inch lower than the left, and when he walked fast or carried anything heavy, you could see it dip and recover, dip and recover. I'd watched it for years. I'd told him 100 times to go back to the orthopedic specialist. "That's my son's shoulder," I said. Jerome pulled up more footage, month after month, night after my payment, same man, same cap, same shoulder, letting himself into my daughter-in-law's apartment with a key, not knocking, not waiting. I sat back in Jerome's kitchen chair. My coffee was warm in my hands. I couldn't drink from it. "There's more," Jerome said. He'd pulled my daughter-in-law's banking records through a contact. Nothing that could go to court without a warrant, but enough to follow the trail. Her monthly expenses ran about $2,400. Rent, groceries, Miles's school activities, utilities, car insurance. More than my $750 was covering by a significant margin. The difference was made up by automatic monthly deposits of $2,200 from a business account, registered to an LLC in Nevada. No name attached, just a routing number. The deposits had been coming in since the month after Patrick supposedly died. "Someone's been supplementing her income all along," Jerome said. "Your $750 barely covers a third of what she actually needs." I stared at the screen. "Then why take my money at all?" Jerome leaned back in his chair and looked at me the way he used to look at case files he hadn't solved yet. "That's exactly the right question," he said. "Before I tell you what we found next, I need to stop here. Because what comes in the next part of this story is where everything I thought I understood about my own family turned inside out, and I want to know you're still with me before I go there. Drop a comment right now if you're listening. 3 words, I'm still here. That's all. And I should say plainly, some elements of this story have been changed to protect the people involved. But the core of it, the truth, the betrayal, what came after, that is as real as anything I have lived. Jerome had spent 3 days tracing the Nevada LLC, shell company, no meaningful name attached. But the bank account feeding it was opened in Columbus, Ohio. The deposits into that account came from cash, dropped at a money services counter inside a Kroger in Worthington, a suburb north of Columbus, on the 6th of every month. Whoever was making those deposits was doing it in person, in cash, with no paper trail. We drove to Worthington on a Thursday morning. Jerome had a contact at the store who let us look at their internal camera log for the past 3 months. The man at the counter each time wore different clothes, different hats, but that shoulder, right side lower than the left, that same dip and recovery on every step, appeared every single month. Jerome arranged for a private investigator to stake out the Kroger on the next 6th. She sent photos. The man got into a gray Honda Civic with Indiana plates and drove to a self-storage facility 2 miles away, off Proprietors Road. He parked in front of Unit 114, stayed about an hour, then left. Jerome and I drove to that facility on a Wednesday night in November. We parked down the road with the windows cracked. Ohio November is gray and mean and cold. Jerome brought a thermos of black coffee. We didn't talk much. At 9:47 p.m., headlights swept across the lot, the gray Civic. The man got out carrying a paper grocery bag. He walked to Unit 114 and knocked. 2 knocks. Pause. 1 knock. The rolling door lifted from inside about 3 feet. He ducked under it. It lowered behind him. 20 minutes passed. Then the door lifted again. The man stepped back out. He turned to say something to whoever was inside, and in the overhead light of the parking lot, his face caught the angle. I had seen that face in 100 Christmas photos, in 100 Sunday dinners. I had watched that face learn to talk, learn to walk, learn to drive. "That's Patrick," I said. My voice came out steady. I don't know how. Jerome put a hand on my arm. "Don't move yet. Let me get us closer." We circled the facility on foot, staying low against the fence line. Jerome had a small digital recorder in his jacket. There was a gap at the side of Unit 114 where the corrugated metal didn't fully meet the concrete, enough to hear through if you stood close. We listened for 11 minutes. "She's still taking the old man's money every month," a voice said. "The man from the grocery bag." Then I heard my son's voice, lower than I remembered, rougher, but unmistakable. "Good. 2 more payments and that's done. You feel anything about that? He must be pushing 70 by now." Silence. Then he chose to help. Nobody forced him. "Your dad thinks you're dead, Patrick." "My dad thinks a lot of things." A pause. "It's better this way. The people I owed money to, if I hadn't disappeared, they would have come for everyone connected to me. Him, my wife, Miles. I didn't have another option." "Your mom, though." The longest silence of my life. "I didn't plan for that," my son said finally. "She was supposed to be okay." Not "I'm sorry," not "I would give anything to take it back," just "I didn't plan for that." Jerome's hand found my shoulder in the dark. I was grateful for it. 2 more months, Patrick continued, and I'm done with all of this. I've got a new identity ready. Heading south. My wife knows the plan. She'll follow with Miles a few months after. They talked a while longer, logistics, timing. Then Jerome pulled me away and we walked back to the car. On the drive home, Jerome was quiet for several miles. Then he said he had something else to show me, about my daughter-in-law. He'd been monitoring her email through his contact network. Nothing court-admissible, but enough. There was a thread between her and a man I'll call Barry. A friend of Patrick's from college, someone Patrick trusted completely. The thread went back 14 months. In one message, she wrote, "By the time Patrick figures out what's happened, we'll already be gone. The account has enough. I'm done pretending." Barry's reply, 2 more months, then we disappear. Patrick can have his new life. He just won't be sharing it with us. The $200 a month Patrick had been sending, she hadn't been setting it aside for their future. She and Barry had been routing it into a joint account in the Cayman Islands for over a year. Patrick thought he was building a getaway fund for his family. He was building a getaway fund for his wife and his college friend. My $750 a month was in that same account. Jerome had found the flight records, 2 one-way tickets, Columbus to Grand Cayman, departing in 8 days. No ticket for Patrick, no ticket for Miles. She was going to leave that boy behind. I sat in my truck outside my house for a long time after Jerome went in. Somebody's porch light was on across the street. I looked at my own front door and I thought about my wife in the living room at 2 in the morning, talking to an urn full of, I didn't know what yet. I knew I had to find out. The urn had sat on my mantel for 2.5 years. I'd dusted around it every week. I won't pretend I hadn't talked to it myself some evenings. Not every night, but some. Jerome came over the next morning with gloves and a flathead screwdriver and didn't make it into a bigger thing than it needed to be. We set the urn on the kitchen table. The lid was sealed with a bead of silicone. Jerome worked around the edge carefully. The seal broke with a soft pop. He lifted the lid. Inside was a Ziploc bag, the kind you'd use for a sandwich. It held gray powder, fine, too light. Beneath the bag, filling the bottom third of the urn, were smooth river stones, the kind sold at any garden center for a few dollars a bag. Jerome opened the bag and touched the powder. He brought it to his nose. Wood ash, he said, from a fireplace, not human remains. I don't remember sitting down, but I was on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, holding one of those stones in my palm, and I was thinking about my wife, about all those nights, about everything she said to a bag of fireplace ash and a handful of river rocks. Jerome sat on the floor beside me. He didn't say anything for a while. He knew when words were useless. After a time he said, "We have everything, recording, financial records, the urn. This ends now if you want it to." "I want to talk to my son first," I said. Jerome nodded. I figured. We went back to the storage unit on a Friday morning. I knocked the way they'd knocked. 2 knocks, pause, 1 knock. The door lifted. My son's face went white. I won't walk you through every word of that conversation. Some things are mine to keep. But I told him about his mother. I told him about the chair in the living room, about the nights she sat there, about the December morning I found her. I told him what she died believing. I watched my son's face change in a way I don't have a name for. He slid down the wall and sat on the concrete, and for a while he couldn't speak. He's still my son. I know that. But standing there looking at him, I understood that the man I'd raised and the man sitting on that floor were 2 different people, and the second one had been building himself in the dark for years. Then I told him about my daughter-in-law and Barry, the offshore account, the tickets, the plan to leave without him, the plan to leave Miles. I watched that land. I told him what I needed, his cooperation, his testimony, his presence before those 2 people boarded a plane. He asked if I still considered him my son. I thought before I answered. "Right now I need you to make a decision," I said. "The answer to your question depends on that one." He came with us. Our attorney helped us present everything to the FBI field office in Cincinnati on a Monday. By Wednesday, federal agents had enough to act. My daughter-in-law and Barry were arrested at the Columbus airport 7 minutes before their boarding group was called. Barry tried to run and made it about 40 feet. The money was frozen before it could be accessed. Most of it came back, minus legal fees. Patrick cooperated fully. He testified in detail and accepted his charges without making my life harder. He's serving time now. He'll be eligible for early release if he earns it. My daughter-in-law received 11 years. Barry received 6. I put what I recovered into a custodial account in Miles's name. College trade school, his choice when the time comes. Miles came to live with me. I turned the second bedroom into his. He picked the color, the particular blue of the Cincinnati Bengals, which I can respect even if I have to look at it every morning. He started at the elementary school 2 blocks away. He made a friend. He started sleeping through the night after about 3 weeks. On a Saturday morning in March, I pulled the old parts bench out of the corner of my garage and cleaned it off, set out a model engine kit I'd been holding onto, called Miles in from the backyard. "You know what this is?" I asked. He looked at the pieces laid out on the bench and shook his head. "Same design as the engine in my first truck. I'm going to show you how it works." He studied the parts. Then he looked up at me. "Did you teach Dad this?" I did. He thought about that for a moment. Okay, he said, show me. We drove to my wife's grave on a Sunday in April. I brought daisies because that's what she liked. Miles stood beside me and held the flowers while I unwrapped them from the plastic sleeve. He'd only known her briefly before she passed. He was 5, and she'd been sick the year before that. He didn't have many memories of her. Was she nice? He asked. She was the kindest person I ever knew, I said. She would have loved having you around. Miles set a single daisy against the headstone on his own, quietly, without being told. Then he took my hand. We stood there a while. The April air was cool, and the cemetery was still except for birdsong from the tree line. I thought about the things I'd gotten wrong. I'd trusted without questioning. I'd accepted a folder of papers from a stranger and let 2.5 years be shaped by a lie, because grief makes you pliable, and because I couldn't conceive of my own son doing what he did. I say that not to excuse myself, but because if you're watching this and something in your life doesn't add up, the numbers change month to month. The story shifts slightly each time you hear it. Something a child says in passing makes your stomach drop. Don't file it away the way I did. Don't tell yourself you're imagining things. I told myself that for 3 months after the first time Miles said something strange. 3 months. But I also want to say this. Forgiveness and forgetting are not the same thing. I forgave my son, not all at once, not without difficulty, and I'm still working at it. Forgiveness is something you do as much for yourself as for the other person. Holding 30 months of rage wasn't going to bring my wife back or help the boy who needed me to show up every single morning. Patrick made choices I will never fully understand. Miles didn't make any of them. Miles is 8 years old, and he lost both his parents in the same month, and he still says thank you to the cafeteria lady, and he still makes his bed without being asked. He didn't get that from anyone who wronged him. He got it from somewhere inside himself. That's worth showing up for. I still drive the same Silverado, still do brake jobs on weekends, mostly for neighbors, mostly because I like the work. Jerome comes by on Thursdays and we argue about the Reds. The garage smells like it always did, oil and metal and cold concrete, and I have stopped finding that smell lonely. There is a model Mustang on Miles's shelf now, finished, painted Wimbledon white, because he researched it and decided that was the most historically accurate color for a 69. He's probably right. I haven't told him yet that it's the same kit I used to build with his father. I'll tell him when he's older. Some things keep until the time is right. We built it together on a Saturday with the garage door open and the radio on low. He had steady hands and he paid attention, and when he made a mistake on one of the door decals, he didn't get upset. He just asked me how to fix it. That's the most important thing, I told him. Not that you don't make mistakes, that you're willing to fix them. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Kids understand more than we think. I turned off the garage light that night and looked at him asleep on the couch with the unfinished car on the coffee table. And I thought about my wife, and I thought about my son, and I thought about all the years that went one way when they might have gone another. Then I covered Miles with the blanket from the chair and went to bed. We had tomorrow. That was enough.